Hello, good morning, sir. My name is Hrishabh Digaari, and the topic of my presentation is deep computer vision using convolutional neural networks. My presentation is for 10 minutes, so I hope you enjoy it. So, what does the computer see? How does the computer process an image? To a computer, images are just numbers. Suppose that we have this picture of Abraham Lincoln, which is made up of pixels. This is a grayscale image. Each of these pixels is just a number matrix, and we can represent numbers as a 2D matrix. So this is how a computer sees an image. Had it been an RGB image, we would have represented it as a 3D matrix. So we know how a computer sees an image, so we can talk about the various computer vision tasks we can perform. The two types of tasks in computer vision are broadly categorized into regression and classification. In regression, the output variable takes a continuous value, whereas in classification, output variable takes a class label. Let's take an example of image classification and say we have a bunch of images of different presidents of United States, and we want to build a classifier pipeline which can predict which president it is, outputting the probability the image is of a particular president. So now you can understand that in order to classify as a picture of Lincoln, we need to know what is unique about Lincoln versus a picture of Obama or Washington, etc. Another way to think about this problem at a high level is in terms of features that are a part of a class. Classification can be thought of a way to detect these features in a given image and decide if this feature is a part of this class, then this image would probably belong to that particular class with higher probability. Now we will see how neural networks will allow us directly learn visual features from visual data if we construct them very cleverly. This is a fully connected neural architecture where we have multiple hidden layers, and each neuron in a given layer is connected to every single neuron in the subsequent layer. Let's say that we wanted to use a fully connected neural network for image classification. In this, our 2D input image is transformed into a vector pixel of values. Then this vector is fed into the network where each neuron in the first hidden layer is connected to all the neurons in the input layer. When we convert it to a vector, we remove all the unnecessary spatial information and get many parameters basically. So let's say that this is a 2D image represented as an array of pixel values, and each neuron in a hidden layer only sees a particular region of what the input to that layer is. This not only reduces the number of weights in our model, but also allows us to leverage the fact that in an image, pixels that are spatially close to each other are probably somewhat related. We can define connections across the whole input by applying the same principle of connecting in patches in the same input layer to neurons in the subsequent layer, and we do this by actually sliding the patch window across the input image. In this case, we are sliding it by 2 units. But remember, our ultimate task is to learn visual features, and the way we achieve this is by weighing these connections between the patch and the neuron in the next layer so as to detect particular features. So this principle is basically applying a filter, essentially a set of weights to extract some sort of local features that are present in our input image. And we can apply multiple filters to extract multiple features. And furthermore, we can spatially share the parameters for each of these filters across the input. So feature that matters in one part of the image should still matter elsewhere in the image, right? In practice, this amounts to this patchy operation called convolution. And if we think about this at a high level, suppose that we have a 4x4 filter, which means we have 16 different weights. And we're going to apply this same filter to 4x4 patches in the input and use the result of that filter operation to define the state of the neuron that this patch is connected to. Then we're going to shift our filter over by a certain width, like 2 pixels, grab the next patch and apply that filtering operation again. I know that there are some questions that arise like, what do I really mean when I say features extract visual features, or how does convolutional operation allow us to do this? So let's make this concrete by taking an example. Suppose we want to compute the convolution of this 5x5 representation of an image and this 3x3 filter. To do this, we need to cover the entirety of this image by sliding this filter by one stride over the image, performing element-wise multiplication at each step, and adding the outputs that result after each element-wise multiplication. This gives us our first entry, then the second, and so on. We continue this process until we have covered the entirety of this image. And that's it. This is convolution. So as you know, you can appreciate how convolution allows us to capitalize on the spatial structure and use these sets of weights to extract local features, and we can very easily detect features simply by applying different filters. These principles are at the core of neural networks used for computer vision tasks, which are called convolutional neural networks. So let's now consider a CNN designed for image classification. Our goal is to learn features directly from image. This means learning the weights of those filters and using these learned features map for classification of these images. Now there are three main operations to CNN. The first is convolution, which we just went through. The second is applying nonlinearity, and the third key idea is pooling, which is effectively like a downsampling operation to reduce the size of the image. Finally, the computation of class course actually outputting a prediction for the class of an image is achieved by a fully connected layer at the end of the network. So in training, we train our model on a set of images and we actually learn those weights and the filters that are going to be used in the network. So after convolution, the next step that I mentioned is applying a non-linearity to the output of a convolution layer. We do this because image data is highly nonlinear, right? And in CNNs, it's very common practice to apply nonlinearities after every convolutional operation, that is, after each convolutional layer. The most common activation function that is used is called the ReLU function, which is essentially a pixel by pixel operation that replaces all the negative values that follow from convolution with 0. The final key operation in CNN is pooling. Now pooling is an operation that is used to reduce dimensionality and to preserve spatial invariance, and a common technique is called max pooling. It's shown in this example and it's exactly what it sounds. You simply take the maximum value in a patch, and in this case a 2x2 patch that is being applied with a stride of 2 over this array. The key idea here is that we are reducing the dimensionality going from one layer to the next. So these are the three key operations in a CNN, and we are now ready to put them together to actually construct our network. The key is that we can layer these operations hierarchically, and by layering them in this way, our network can be trained to learn a hierarchy of features present in the image data. So CNN for image classification can be broken down into two parts. The first is this feature learning pipeline, where we learn features in our input images through these convolution layers, and finally the second half is that these convolutional and pooling layers will output high-level features that are present in the input images. And then we can pass these features onto fully connected layers to actually do the classification task. These fully connected layers can effectively output probability distribution from the images over a set of possible classes. A common way that this is achieved is using this function called softmax, whose output represents a categorical probability distribution over the set of classes that you're interested in. So the final key piece is, how do we train this? Through backpropagation. The important thing to keep in mind is that we're learning when we're training CNNs. What we learn when we train a CNN model is the weights of those convolutional filters. So in the end, I'd like to consider three different applications of CNNs beyond image classification. The first one being segmentation, where the task is to assign each pixel in the image an object class to produce a segmentation of the image. Object detection, where we want to detect instances of specific objects in the image. Image captioning, where the task is to generate a language description of the image that captures its meaning. Thank you.